This is not a story about war. War is loud. It is chaotic. It is defined by the screech of metal and the shouting of men who think they are making history. This is a story about silence. Meet Elias. By all medical accounts, Elias is a healthy man. His vocal cords are intact. His tongue is functional. His brain can process language, formulate sentences, and understand complex questions. If you were to walk into this room right now and ask him the time, he would look at the clock, then look at you, but he would not tell you. People often assume silence like this is a result of shock, that something exploded too close to his head, or that fear stole his voice in a trench somewhere. They assume he cannot speak. They are wrong. Elias can speak. He simply refuses to. For 40 years, he has moved through a world of noise without adding a single decibel to it. He buys groceries, he pays bills, he listens to the radio. But the moment his mouth opens, the moment the air catches in his throat to form a word, he stops. He closes his eyes, and he swallows the sound. Why? Because Elias understands something that the rest of us have forgotten. We think words are free. We think we can say whatever we want, and once the breath leaves our lungs, it disappears. But Elias knows better. He knows that words are the beginning of actions, and actions are the only things that remain when the shouting stops. He remembers the last time he spoke freely. He remembers the day the world made sense, and mostly, he remembers the moment he was given a choice, disguised as a command. He remembers the order.
The comfort of change.
To understand the silence, you have to understand the noise that came before it. Rewind, go back. Before the silence, Elias was not a monster. He wasn't a hero either. He was a man who found comfort in the machinery of authority. There is a seduction to military life that civilians rarely understand. It isn't about violence. It's about the removal of choice. In the civilian world, you have to decide who you are every morning. You have to decide what is right, what is wrong. It is exhausting. Elias loved the uniform, not for the power it gave him, but for the anonymity. When you wear the same color as 10,000 other men, you stop being a person. You become a function. He told himself the lie that millions of men tell themselves. I am just a hand. The head is somewhere else. If the head decides to strike, the hand is not guilty. The hand is just moving. For the first 2 years, this philosophy worked. It was his shield. The war was just a series of logistical problems. Move this crate, drive this truck, stand at this checkpoint. He found peace in the bureaucracy. Rules reduced fear. If you followed the procedure, you were safe. If you followed the procedure, you were good. Internalize that. Elias believed he was a good man because he was an obedient man. In his mind, those two words meant the same thing. He didn't notice that the procedure was changing. He was sleeping with his eyes open, and the world was getting very, very dark. The narrowing hallway. The darkness didn't arrive with a scream. It arrived on a clipboard. It crept in through the cracks of the daily routine, boring and administrative. The pressure began to build in the 3rd year. The orders changed texture. At first, it was secure the perimeter, then confiscate the supplies, then detain the males of fighting age. Elias felt the discomfort. He felt that small, sickening knot in his stomach. But he had a mechanism for that. He had the procedure. He would think, this is temporary. This is necessary. Someone smarter than me decided this. This is how the mind protects itself. It uses passive language, not "I am hurting them," but "they are being relocated." Not "I am stealing," but assets are being seized. The self, the I, starts to disappear from the sentence. Elias was erasing himself from his own actions. He stopped looking at faces. Faces make you ask questions. Instead, he looked at hands, shoes, coat buttons. If you don't look them in the eye, they aren't people. They are obstacles. He stopped feeling like a man who made choices. He became a conduit, a wire that simply carried the current from the officer's voice to his own hands. Wires don't feel guilt. Wires don't ask why. But a wire cannot feel pain, and Elias was beginning to feel heavy. He was standing in a hallway that was getting narrower and narrower, and at the end of that hallway there was a door, and behind that door was the order. The fracture. It was a Tuesday. The air smelled of wet wool and diesel. The unit had been moving for 3 days without sleep. Nerves were frayed. The command came down the line. It wasn't shouted. It was passed along like a whisper. Clear the structure. Leave no one behind. Elias stood by the barn. There were 5 people inside. Not soldiers, not insurgents, just people. This was the moment, the fracture point. Years before, Elias had told himself that if he ever faced a true moral crisis, he would be the hero. He thought the choice would be dramatic. He thought he would stand tall and say no. But in the mud, with cold water running down his collar, he didn't think about heroism. He thought about the man standing next to him. He thought about what happens to soldiers who break the line. He realized that refusal was possible. He could turn around, but the cost of refusal was immediate. The cost of obedience seemed abstract. He looked at the officer. The officer nodded, and Elias obeyed. It wasn't hatred. Understand that. Elias didn't even know their names. He pulled the trigger because the silence of disobedience was more terrifying than the noise of the gun. He did it because saying no felt impossible, while following orders felt routine. And in that second, the illusion collapsed. The idea that he was just a wire, just a tool, shattered. The officer walked away. The unit moved on. A truck engine coughed and sputtered back to life, indifferent to what had just happened. But Elias didn't move, because for the first time in 3 years, the sentence in his head changed. It wasn't, "they were removed." It wasn't, "it was required." The voice in his head, loud and clear, said, "I did this." He opened his mouth to speak to the soldier next to him. He wanted to say something, to justify it, to beg, to scream, but his throat closed. He realized that any word he spoke now would be a lie. To speak would be to pretend he was still a man, and he knew he wasn't anymore. He closed his mouth, and he never opened it again. The long aftermath. The war ended 6 months later. The world celebrated. Men washed the dirt off their hands and went back to being grocers and mechanics. They spoke, they laughed, they moved on. Elias went home too, but he did not move on. To Elias, language had become the enemy. Words were the tools people used to lie to themselves. To speak was to collaborate. Every word spoken at that table felt like a brick in a wall of denial. To say, "pass the salt," was to pretend the hand holding the shaker hadn't done what it did. To say, "good morning," was to lie. Silence became his penance, a prison he built brick by brick. He did not seek forgiveness. He knew he didn't deserve it. His silence was a form of containment. He was keeping the monster inside, locking it behind his teeth so it could never hurt anyone again. He is not haunted by the ghosts of the dead. He is haunted by the ghost of his own compliance. So, we return to the room, the chair, the ticking clock. Elias is looking at you. You can see the intelligence in his eyes. You can see the sorrow. If you asked him his name, he would not answer. If you asked him if he was sorry, he would not answer. He understands that there are no words big enough to fix what broke that day in the rain. History will not record his name. He will die, and his story will vanish. That is the way he wants it. He followed one order. It took 5 seconds to execute. The order lasted 5 seconds. The silence has lasted a lifetime.